2025 is going to be one of those rare, once-in-a-decade moments for strategy games, and not just because of Civilization 7. Here are some of my top, best, new, most anticipated strategy and simulation games releasing in 2025. Grey Eminence is the first game on my list, and rightly so. This grand strategy simulation game, indie game, really piqued my interest when they announced it would have over 1 million tiles. In its real world, obviously real Earth map, starting in the year 1356, there are in total over apparently 700 playable countries in this grand strategy simulation game that will probably remind you of the classic kind of map game. I'm thinking obviously Victoria 3, a rich, deep economic simulation where we can fine-tune the laws of our country as well as the goods that we are producing. The game will render, produce, simulate over 50 different goods inside of this world. But more than that Victoria-style logistics, trade, economic simulator, what intrigues me about it is that they're also claiming it will be a game of diplomacy, a game of warfare and intrigue, with, and I quote, character-driven politics and diplomacy, where each country is a unique amalgam of its elites and their competing interests. So, could this game be more than just a really deep and detailed map game? Well, we'll find out. Scheduled to release sometime soon. A closed alpha, also by the way, is on the way at the time of recording. The second entry has a slightly more specific release window, thankfully, releasing in Q3 of 2025. This, my friends, is Menace. Menace is a turn-based strategy game, and a sort of RPG-esque game as well, in my view, inspired by the likes of XCOM or Xenonauts. You undertake missions, obviously in a sort of a sci-fi setting. However, unlike some of those other games, the way that Menace handles missions works a little bit differently. Here, multiple missions are stacked together inside of an overall operation. The operations themselves, by the way, procedurally generated. How the game produces missions, puts them together, puts them into an operation, and then where you'll actually fight, the actual battle map. So the replayability here is theoretically endless once you've got the tactics nailed down. And of course, there's that overarching element here of creating a story, of training specific characters with their own equipment and unlocks, tanks and mechs in this case, to try and work your way through multiple missions. So there's that menacing threat of losing your favorite dude. Speaking of losing, let's talk about the third entry, Espiocracy, with a release date pinned at this stage for 2025. We don't know an awful lot about Espiocracy other than that you'll lead an intelligence agency during the Cold War, 1946, through to somewhere close-ish to the modern day. We've only seen one initial trailer, and it released at the time of recording about 8 months ago. A few screenshots, but that's really it for what promises to be a grand strategy simulation game where you'll play as one of 74 different playable countries. Working in the shadows, obviously, influence, ideology, coups, proxy wars should all be the focus here. From the limited looks we have had, which I've slowed down here so you can get just a slightly better grasp of, it looks like an interesting, rich, and deep political simulation game. Really obviously focusing in on that politics and that espionage side of things. Absolutely on my wish list, and one to watch with single and multiplayer like the rest of the games so far on my list. Espiocracy is, at the moment at least, just a PC game, releasing sometime in 2025. More specificity thankfully comes to our fourth entry, Broken Arrow, which now has a specific release month, releasing in the middle of 2025 in June. Broken Arrow, which you may, like me, have already played in one of its open betas, one of its testing sessions that's taken place over the last, jeepers, year, 2 years, maybe? This game is something that is surprisingly rare. As you can see, it's a modern warfare game that's also a strategy, a real-time strategy game, with 300 some different military units, Obviously, we're talking land, sea, and skies. Broken Arrow actually delivers a very fun real-time strategy game. Take command and control of a whole load of different units. Maybe you'll do it in online, maybe you'll do it in single player. However you're engaging in the strategic combat, the tactical fights, the one thing that I want to stress here is that's just what Broken Arrow is trying to do. It's not trying, rightly or wrongfully, to overstretch, to lean into different areas, politics, diplomacy. No. It's just strictly focused on being an action-packed, real-time strategy game set in large, often, as you can see, urban or semi-urban warfare, combat-ready settings. Sometimes not so combat-ready settings, and that's part of the fun too. Can it deliver on all of this? Man, I really hope so. And I also hope it can properly deliver across a range of systems. This one may be slightly hungrier than most, requiring a GTX, I think 2080 in its recommended graphical settings. It could need an upgrade of your system. What won't probably need an upgrade of your system next is Slay the Spire 2, a sequel to the first, still releasing in 2025. Slay the Spire 2 is a DECK builder meet roguelike game. The first one, absolutely brilliant and so playable, so my hopes for the second are very high. Launching, I believe, just as a single player game, and with potential, of course, to release on so many systems it's not even funny. I fell in love with the original Slay the Spire. In fact, not so fun fact, on an iPad. Slay the Spire 2 promises to deliver what looks to be a very similar playstyle. Though, as they've already teased, and as you can see on screen, wham bam thank you ma'am right now, some returning characters, but also some new characters who you'll pick and play through one run, branching down different paths, grabbing different cards for your deck, and then playing them within a single turn, depending on how much mana you've got. A classic card builder, deck builder game meets rogue-like element. If you haven't played the original, you absolutely should before the second one comes out, coming to early access, as I mentioned, in 2025. Also releasing some point in 2025, Mars Tactics, the second and final turn-based tactics shooter game on my list. Mars Tactics makes my list for two reasons. Firstly, I like the setting and overall theme. Obviously, Mars. Overall theme, corporate overlords versus the labor workers union. One of two core factions who you'll be playing as you work your way through different missions, gaining gear, making decisions, and rallying a team. A team, of course, that will fight inside of tactical maps that really, I think, highlight the second key thing that makes Mars Tactics a little different, and that's its destructible environments. As you're playing through as the labor unions or the corporate overlords making those decisions, you might need some cover. You can create some by lobbing an explosive, destroying a fence, destroying a building. However you choose to do it, the interactions between the completely destructible environment and your team should be what make Mars Tactics stand out from the rest of the turn-based tactical shooter games. Speaking of tactics and classics, Heroes of Might and Magic Olden Era is the next game here on my list. Releasing in the second quarter, that's April, May, or June of 2025, delivers on, as you might imagine, that really iconic Heroes of Might and Magic gameplay in both single-player and multiplayer settings, and the team behind it have been slowly revealing some of the different units that you might pick up inside of the obviously turn-based fights. When you're not fighting inside of this battle map, you'll be exploring the broader world, perhaps upgrading kingdoms as you work your way through, managing your castles, picking up new units, and obviously picking up a sword and taking to the fight. I've recently been playing a little bit of Songs of Conquest, so I'm back in that kind of Heroes of Might and Magic mindset, looking forward to seeing just how this one launches and how it will be received in the first half of 2025. But if I'm being honest with you, I might be a bit distracted by the kingpin of this video. How could I not mention Sid Meier's Civilization 7, releasing with a concrete release date, like many of the other next entries in this video, the 11th of February, or the 6th of February if you'd like to pre-order it or get some sort of deluxe edition. Civ 7 is the next entry in the Civilization simulator that is, running for 30-some years. Civ 7 is obviously introducing a few twists though. If you're new here, you might not have heard them before. If you're not new here, you probably have. But bear with me for the next 30-ish seconds. Civilization 7 is introducing changing civs across its 3 different in-game ages. Another twist to the classic formula in combat comes with these commander units, able to hoover up, to vacuum up nearby units, transport them across the map and then unpack them. Or you could reinforce and transport your combat units directly to a commander within the space of roughly 1 turn. Civilization 7 is changing the game. Back to those changing civs, you won't just play as 1 but 3 across a campaign. However, your leader, historical, will remain consistent. It's going to be a biggie. I'm going to be covering it a lot here. Next up is Kaiserpunk. Again, a concrete release date in February of 2025. It could very well be a busy month. Kaiserpunk has an obvious theme in this grand strategy city builder game set in an alternate, but perhaps broadly historically inspired world. This is a world of zeppelins, of mighty bombers, and of what is promising to be a fairly interesting economic simulation as well. Not just a game about combat, but a game about grand strategy, about logistics, about a whole roster of goods inside of 100-some regions ready to be conquered and exploited. Kaiserpunk is looking to do all of the things that make strategy games, grand strategy games, interesting to me, and it remains on my list, releasing very soon. Also releasing kind of soon is Tempest Rising. At the time of recording, just a few months away. The 24th of April 2025 is when this bad boy will hit your screens. And like 1 or 2 of the earlier entries like Broken Arrow, it's a game that I've played. Maybe you have too. A real-time strategy game about building a base, a war game at that. This one is all about the fight. And of course it's coming in a year where the not mentioned here, but hotly anticipated, game that I have mentioned before in videos like this, Stormgate, is also releasing. Real-time strategy is set to have yet another huge year in 2025, again not to be overshadowed by the likes of Civilization 7. Here we're seeing that classic RTS game. 2 factions playable at launch, 3 in future, epic skirmishes as well as campaigns, ranked multiplayer, all of that RTS goodness. Speaking of RTS goodness, but sadly a game we know very little about, it's Anno, its next release, 117 Pax Romana, a classic setting for an Anno game, going way back some 2,000 years, and hopefully the somewhat limited development of human civilization doesn't hold it back. I'll probably be flamed for even just mentioning that in the comments section, but I do worry a little bit. You know, Anno is great when it's set in a somewhat modern setting. Go back 100, 200-ish years. Is it great if you go back 2,000 years? Maybe it is. Time will tell. As I say, we know very little about this game, apart from a few screenshots and a trailer that is anything but a gameplay trailer. So let's move swiftly along to a game that I mentioned about 2 years ago. This is Fragile Existence. It says on Steam it's releasing in 2025, and I really hope that it does. For much like the next and final entry on my list, Fragile Existence is a strategy game set in space. This one, really a 4X game. One set in space, but also focused quite heavily on the planets within it. Fragile Existence is a real-time strategy, survival, come grand strategy. It's trying to do a lot, and man alive, is it ambitious in its scale. Long story short, using laneways through space, you'll expand beyond our solar system to explore future ones, and that exploration seems key here. as well as, of course, resource gathering, you'll look to kind of both explore space, but also crucially, as you can tell from this early pre-alpha footage, also explore the actual planets themselves. It looks to do something that has really piqued my interest, to stretch deep, not just through planets and solar systems, but also on the ground, the real terrestrial surface of those worlds. Speaking of worlds and out of this world strategic gameplay, the final entry, and again with a big old question mark, it's Falling Frontier. Falling Frontier promises to be another massive space strategy game, a real-time strategy game. And I don't know if it's just that I've been playing a lot of Sins 2 recently, but I feel that it could have a similar scale to that game, to Sins of a Solar Empire 2, though perhaps approaching a slightly different niche. Here there's a big focus, again it seems, on this game's hopefully vast and we know procedurally generated world, a star system to explore in real time, where things like logistics, like enemy supply lines, carefully laid traps seem to be the focus in what hopefully will be a very strategic simulation of space. Thank you for joining me in this video looking at my highlights for what will be a massive 2025 for strategy gaming. Do let me know in the comments down below. Let's hive mind the games that I stupidly missed and didn't cover in this video. I'll see you down there and next time.